So, as we mentioned earlier, a federal appeals court has denied former President Trump's attempt to conceal records from the January 6th committee. The three-judge panel said that the committee's, quote, unique legislative need for the requested documents outweighs Trump's claim of executive privilege. The court gave Trump and his legal team 14 days to file an appeal, though, to the Supreme Court before the ruling goes into effect. So for more on this and the latest on the January 6th investigation, I want to bring in Zak Hudak. He is joining me now from Washington. Okay, Zak, so let's sort of dig into this. It's a three-judge panel. They sided with the House committee unanimously in a 68-page opinion yesterday. How did they explain the decision that they came to?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. That's just right, they did. These are 700 pages of documents that the committee says they need from the Trump White House that in different ways involve January 6th, the days leading up to it, the days after it. One of the three judges wrote an opinion that explains their decision, and in it, she wrote that there are two things they have to weigh here: the importance of the Select Committee's investigation and getting to the bottom of everything that led up to that day. And the other thing is Mr. Trump's argument that these are privileged documents, that it sets a somewhat dangerous precedent to be releasing documents from a White House that says that they are highly sensitive and should not be released. The judge who wrote the opinion wrote that Mr. Trump's arguments do not come close enough, was the quote, nearly close enough, excuse me, to superseding the needs of the committee and the importance of that investigation.
So this doesn't mean that the committee gets everything they want right away, because the Trump's team also has 2 weeks basically to file an appeal. Have we heard from the former president's legal team? What are they saying about this decision?
His spokesperson, Liz Harrington, said last night that this was always destined for the Supreme Court. So I think there's really no surprise either on the former president's side or on the Select Committee side. These lawyers have known for a long time that pretty much no matter what, this is going to end up at the Supreme Court. And at the Supreme Court, everything becomes a little bit more up in the air, because all of a sudden we have 9 judges making the decision, a much more national audience than even we do now. And the court's going to be factoring in big, big ideas like the precedent that it sets and the way that it's going to affect the country and affect the respect for the institution. I think there's really a lot at stake here and a lot of other factors that come in when it goes to the Supreme Court and not just a circuit court.
And, tying things up in the court system is also kind of part of a greater strategy, too, for some. Former Trump Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, is now suing the House committee. There are conversations that Meadows and the National Archives are in talks over records that he failed to turn over. So what do we know about sort of the current status of things with Mark Meadows, his conversations that he's having? Is he going to cooperate partially or not at all? What's happening?
The records that are in question with the archives, that's a matter of if while you're in the White House, you use your personal devices or personal emails to do official business, there's a rule that you have 20 days to officially turn that information over. Archives basically says that Mr. Meadows did not do that across the board. But I do want to make a couple other points about Mark Meadows. He was cooperating to a point and has entirely pulled out. It seems that there was some very somewhat damning information that he had turned over to the committee. The chairman, Benny Thompson, said earlier this week that among the documents while he was cooperating, he gave them was a PowerPoint presentation on election fraud and options for January 6th that the White House planned to pass out on Congress. It included talking points and things like that, and the idea of invoking a national emergency over election fraud. So there was a lot that he gave the committee, but at this point, he's pulled out entirely and said he's invoking the Fifth Amendment. This is almost certainly part of a strategy that we're seeing more and more of the former president's allies adopt here, which is to cooperate just enough that once the House inevitably finds them in contempt, it's much, much harder for the Justice Department to actually prosecute. If you look at the indictment against Steve Bannon, it's very clear that he didn't cooperate from day one. It explicitly says that. With Meadows, it's going to be a lot more complicated because he did give them things that it seems are going to be integral to their investigation. And he's claiming he wanted to cooperate, but it was only because they couldn't come to terms. He's actually invoking a constitutional right now. So basically he is protecting himself from prosecution by cooperating a little bit, but not entirely.
Yeah. In the meantime, there are plenty of people cooperating. A former top Trump administration defense aide was among the 4 witnesses to appear yesterday before the committee. What more do we know about what they had to say?
That was Kash Patel, and he was the spokesperson for the acting defense secretary on January 6th. And that's relevant because the committee wants to know all about the conversations that the president and the president's allies were having with military officials leading up to that day and on that day, both potential for him trying to use the military to stay in power in various ways, but also for delaying military and National Guard response on January 6th. So that's going to be very integral. But what Patel said yesterday was that he never intended not to talk to the committee, and that he actually found out about the subpoena that they issued him from news reports, that he would have been happy to talk to them without legal action. But we haven't found out much of what he told them yesterday.
Meantime, another person cooperating, a prominent organizer of the Stop the Steal rally with ties to members of Congress, is cooperating with the House committee. What more do we know about what that person had to say, and how soon maybe we could start to see evidence or some of this testimony or anything that the committee is hearing?
That's Ali Alexander, who, unlike Patel, is very friendly with the media and likes to talk to us. So we know a lot about what he said in there. He actually released his opening statement, and the argument that he made is that despite the fact that he was one of the key organizers of the January 6th protest on the, rally on the Ellipse, he's on the documents that for the registration for the event. So he was clearly very involved, but he claims that he and his associates only entered the Capitol after violence was taking place, and they only entered to try to create peace, and that's what they were doing. They were working with Capitol Police, trying to calm folks down. Now the committee, we have to assume, because they've dug through hours and hours of surveillance video from the building, are going to have a good sense of whether he's telling the truth or not. We haven't seen that video yet, but I suspect we will find out in the coming weeks. We do know that in 2022, the committee is planning to have several hearings pretty early on. So I think that's when we're really going to start seeing evidence flow out. And they really have a pretty hard deadline here of trying to get things wrapped up as soon as possible, because there's high risk that Democrats do not maintain control of the House. And Republican leadership has already made it very clear that if they win in 2022, this committee won't exist anymore. The investigation will be over. So I think in the first quarter of 2022, we're going to start getting information, but they really need to wrap things up by mid-year, or sort of 3/4 of the way through, if they're going to really be able to get any results here.
Yeah, Zach, really good reminder for everyone. Zach, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne Marie.